Hey everyone, so I am recapping 11/22/63, entitled The Rabbit Hole. At least that's the first episode is entitled. Um, so it starts off with this guy, Harry Dunning, who is telling the story of one Halloween night in 1960, um, and how this Halloween night really messed things up for him, and how um, he doesn't like Halloween anymore because of what had happened. Now, what happened was, according to him, his father came home one day, or on that Halloween night, and killed his mother, brother, and sister. Um, and so that is what he calls the um, the night that changed his life. Now, when he's finished telling the story, he his teacher, Jake Epping, tells the rest of the class that his story is one of the best stories that could be told, is because of the fact that it's so emotional and it's real and it's just true and everything. So after the class ends, Harry talks to Jake about Jake writing a letter of recommendation for Harry for a job at the school. And Jake accepts to do this for Harry. Next thing you see is Jake eating at a friend's diner, his friend Al Templeton's diner. Al and Jake start talking about a story that Al sees on the table next to Jake. Jake then just starts talking about whatever concerning the story, and then Christy, Jake's Jake's wife comes in and pretty much starts talking to Jake about how sorry she feels that his mother, sorry, not mother, father died while he was on the plane to go see his father before he died. And then Christy pulls out divorce papers from her purse, saying that she already signed them, and so Jake just then needs to sign them to make the divorce final. And so he does that, and then they both get up and say, best of luck to you. Hope everything works out for you and everything. So, but while they're having this conversation, you see Al go into the back of the diner, and then returns about 2 minutes later after Christy leaves. And Al is, coughing very, very, very hard, and sounds like he's coughing up one or both of his lungs and everything. And then, so Jake asks him what's going on, but Al rebuffs him and everything, and Jake takes him to the hospital and brings Al back home to his house, Al's house that is, and says again what's going on, because 1 minute Al was fine and the next he wasn't, and Al replies, cancer, like it's some sort of joke, like, it's cancer. Jake points out to Al that you got cancer in 5 minutes. Like, how is that possible? You got cancer in 5 minutes. So Al's response to that is uh, leave, close the door behind you, and I'll tell you once you come back over tomorrow. So Jake leaves, and the next day you see him teaching his high school class. Um, During that class period, he notices a kid having laughed at a video that he's watching, which is weird because he's not supposed to be, watching videos during class because it's school time. So after class, he asks the kid, look, what were you watching that's distracting you from class? And the kid shows him this bird bobbing up and down, um, bobbing up and down to to some music, whatever. First time I watched this, I was like, what was the point of showing us that? So whatever. But so then Jake decides to go to Al's house after the school day ends, and while there, Al asks him how long they've known each other, which Jake replies 10 to 12 years. And then he proceeds to ask Jake if Jake trusts Al, which Jake says he doesn't really trust him. So Al goes off to say that he's gonna tell something to Jake that's gonna sound crazy, and but and before he can actually do that, he needs Jake to go into the closet of the diner, in the back of the diner, and to just look around and stay as long as he needs to, if he needs to stay. If he needs to stay longer than like a minute or two. So Jake goes in after about 2 or 3 minutes, and he ends up in outside somewhere, presumably outside of the diner, clearly in another time. And he stands there for like 5 minutes, give or take, very confused as to what's actually going on. And this dude who looks like he's homeless, has a hat on with a yellow card inside the hat, says like 3 or 4 times, "You shouldn't be here," to Jake. Before Jake, starts running back to where he came from and lands back inside the diner's closet. He comes out of the closet, says to Al, "What the fuck is going on? Like, what the hell just happened here?" And Al's like, "That was October 21st, 1960. Jake doesn't really believe it, but Al's like, "Well, you know what? The only reason why I told you to go into the closet was because if I just said flat out what was in the closet, you'd never believe me, so that's why I asked you to go in there beforehand." And he calls the what's in the closet the rabbit hole, hence the title. And Jake asks how long the rabbit hole has been in the diner, and Al's response is that it's been there ever since he's owned the diner. Jake then asks who else knows about this, and Al's like, "Only you and me," because it will prevent Al from doing what needs to be done. And Jake's like, "Well, what's that? What do you mean? Do what? Like, what exactly do you mean?" And Al asks Jake if he's ever heard of the butterfly effect, to which Jake says, "Yes, I have." And then Al proceeds to say that if John F. Kennedy was, saved, so was his brother Robert when he's assassinated during his campaign to be president. And further, there would be no Vietnam, hence butterfly effect. Jake brings up, to my opinion, the best response there is, that just because you save JFK doesn't necessarily mean that the future is going to be altogether better, or beautiful, um, because of saving him. And um, Al's not convinced. He says saving Kennedy will make the world a better place, regardless. And Jake's response again is Al has no proof that changing the past, or saving Kennedy is gonna make the world better, in the present. And then Al's like, you know what? Here's a knife. Go try to, change something in the past and see if that changes anything. Um, so Jake takes a knife, goes back into 1960, and carves the initials JFK on the tree trunk. Um, and so uh, Jake goes back into the diner after carving the initials on the tree in 1960, and goes to the tree outside the diner. And lo and behold, there's the initials JFK on. Um, there's the initials on the tree trunk. Um, and as Jake is looking at it, Hal's like, next time you go into the rabbit hole, Carver won't be there, because when you go into the rabbit hole, change something, come back out the rabbit hole, and then try to go back into the rabbit hole, it changes, like it resets everything. So you can't exactly, go in and out of the rabbit hole and keep what you changed beforehand intact. Um, and Al's like, it doesn't matter, and Al continues to say that it doesn't matter how long you stayed, whether it's 1 hour, 2 weeks, or 5 years. Um, only 2 minutes in the real world, or not in the real world, I should say, 2 minutes in the present, have passed. Only 2 minutes. And so, and Al tells Jake that when he and Christy were talking, Al was in 1960, and he stayed until about 1962 in October 1962. Al tells Jake to think about it, whatever. And so Jake goes back to high school, I guess later that night, see see Harry's graduation with the other adults. And Jake is sitting next to this woman named Alice, and he asks Alice if she's looked at the recommendation that he put in for Harry. She tells Jake she can't accept Harry's application for the new position at the school, because he's just not that he's not going to be good at managing other people, and doing timesheets and all this stuff, and just the new responsibilities associated with it. He's not going to be good at it, so she can't accept it. So then it cuts to the next day, where Jake goes to Al's house for information, where Al shows Jake his study with all the information that he gathered, at least up until the last time he went into the rabbit hole. And Al asks Jake if he knows what he thinks of who killed JFK, and why and all that stuff. And Jake says, well, everyone seemed to think it was Oswald. Al replies to him that it really can't be Oswald, because the guy just doesn't make any sense. Because everyone studied him after the assassination, not before, like Al has done. So Al tells Jake that he saw Oswald coming back from Russia, and Jake, asks the obvious question: why didn't you shoot Oswald? And he said, and Al's response is that he didn't know for sure if Oswald shot JFK, and so he can't consciously shoot and kill Oswald on just a maybe. So um, Al thinks that Oswald shot General Walker 6 months before on April 10th, 1963. And Al wants Jake to go back in time, wait until April 10th, 1963 to see if Oswald shot Walker, because Walker was shot with at least with the same type of gun that JFK was shot with. And if Oswald shot Walker, then he most likely shot JFK. And so, therefore, Jake can do something about Oswald before JFK is assassinated. Jake still isn't sure because he doesn't know how he will live in 1960 and after that, because he wouldn't have a job, and he would need to be able to create an identity and and create documents and everything, because and that's gonna take time. So and that's time he doesn't have. So but apparently Al has thought of all this, because Al already has documents and everything ready to go, along with a little book that has sports stats on it, so that Jake can get some money real quick and use that money to start the process. And so Jake then still says he needs to think about it and everything, and Al gets all butthurt in his feelings, because he's like, well, if you're not gonna help me, it's like whatever. And he gets all butthurt because it's like, well, he assumed Jake is gonna start making up excuses as to why he can't do anything with it, and he just tells Jake to get out the house and just leave and whatever. Jake goes home, has a restless night, comes back the next day, and tries to apologize to Al. Al doesn't open the front door for whatever reason. Jake goes inside and sees Al dead. And that's when Jake decides that he was dead. He definitively wants to go, save JFK. So one season, 1960, Jake mostly heeds Al's advice about how to blend in. He gets a haircut. Cuts the facial hair off his face, gets clothes that most adult men wear in 1960, which is suits and ties. But this is where he deviates from Al's advice. He doesn't get a boring, reliable car. He gets a standout-ish car, and as he pays the dealer for the car, he's like, hey, is there a place where I can place a bet to get more money, because I'm low on cash. So he goes to the bar that the dealer suggests, and he tries to make a bet on just one particular guy in a boxing match to win. And the guy tells him that it's a 3-to-1 odds for the guy to win, which is not a lot of money. So Jake's like, well, what if I say the guy I pick to win will win in round 6? The guy then is like, okay, that's a 35-to-1 odd where the guy you pick wins, and that's considerably a lot more money. So Jake decides to bet on the 35-to-1 odds that his pick will win in the 6th round. So the guy wins. Eventually, the guy wins, and he's paid. The bookie is like, you know what, count the money. And so Jake's like, well, I don't want to count it right now. And the bookie's like, count it anyway. So Jake counts the money, leaves, but then is followed by 2 croonies of the bookie, and 2 croonies of the bookie. 2 of them will tell that Jake excuse me, to the motel that Jake goes to for the night, and the um, he distracts the one guy with a video on his iPhone of the bird that's bobbing up and down to the music, the one that the kid was looking at the day or two before, and then knocks the dude out and whatever, um, and escapes with the phone and all his belongings. And he almost gets in an accident as he drives away with the yellow card man, but manages to not get into an accident. The next morning, you see Jake on a bridge outside of his car, looking at pictures of him and his ex-wife on his iPhone. He then chucks his iPhone into the water below, and then makes his way to Dallas, Texas. Once there, he looks for he kind of like scouts where JFK was shot, and as he's kind of walking backward, a bunch of Catholic schoolgirls run into him, and this big hoopla and everything. He drops his stuff, and the nun with them says, "We'll pray for you," whatever. And this woman on a bench nearby, whose name is Sadie, she sees this whole thing and comments on how he might have like this thing for Catholic schoolgirls or something like that. And they get to talking, and she almost leaves her handbag there when she leaves, but then Jake stops her and tells her that she left her handbag there. She's like, "Oh, thank you. I didn't mean to." And they then talk about books that their favorite books, and then how the books were turned into movies and whether the movie was good or not, and yada yada yada. And then he decides to rent a room from a woman in town. While you see Jake looking over Al's notes and stuff in the room by himself, Al's like, "Well, you can't really get close to anybody because you have a mission here to do. You have a mission here, and getting close to anybody is gonna just hinder you when you have to go back to 2016 after it's finished. And so you can't really get close to anybody." And Al also says that you have to realize when the past is pushing back, because it's going to push back, and rather forcefully. 2 seconds later, the point is proven when Jake decides to go into a phone booth and call his father. While the phone call connected, there's a lot of static and he can't hear anything really, so he can't really hear his father all that well, so he hangs up the phone. He leaves the phone booth, walks a good way a ways, and then turns back around to go back and try to call his father again. As he's walking toward the phone booth, a car completely smashes into it, knocking it off out of where it was first standing, and the person inside the car flies out of it, and it looks like she's dead when Jake bends over her, but apparently not, because she opens her eyes and says, "You shouldn't be here," just like the yellow card man. Jake then runs all the way back to the house that he's renting the room from, and throws up in the waste paper basket in his room. So then there's another voiceover from Al, where he's explaining that to Jake that there's not really much that he's going to be able to do, besides just waiting for Oswald to come back from Russia in 1962. So Al suggests that Jake follow George de Mohrenschildt, who is a Russian expat, who gets all buddy-buddy to Oswald. Al says that George was part of the CIA. He doesn't know when he became part of the CIA, but he does, and so he assumes that because George was part of the CIA, he is Lee's handler. Can't really say that's for certain, but that's what Al says. So Jake starts following George Warnshield, and he follows the Warnshield into a presidential rally that JK is holding for himself as president and Johnson as his vice president. After the rally, George goes into an after party upstairs, and Jake lies to get himself into the after party. He's then caught and told not to do it again to, get anywhere near JFK. Another voiceover later has Al saying that one night in particular that didn't seem important before actually is, where Jake is supposed to follow the Warnshield. And so Jake follows the Warnshield to a restaurant called El Conejo, where George and his wife were to have dinner. Al says to beware of the past pushing back, mainly because outside the restaurant there is a group of guys who are fighting, and they end up getting in a fist fight, and if Jake is pulled in, then he can't exactly, get out of it and listen in on what Warnshield is saying to these two guys that he is meeting. Once inside, Warnshield and his wife go to separate places. His wife goes into the bar, the Warnshield goes into the restaurant. So Jake goes into the restaurant, and the host says there's no more tables. Jake gives him, I guess, a 20 or something higher to get him a table. The host says, oh, well, there's a table now suddenly available. And Jake gives him another bill to give him a specific table, which is right near the Warnshield's table. And just as he's being brought down to the table that he requested, a waiter with a tray that has a candle that's lit and several shots around the candle turns around and bumps into somebody else. And the waiter spills the tray with the candle and the alcohol, and the alcohol is caught on fire by the candle on the flame and starts a fire. And this is right in front of Jake. Thankfully, Jake is not, burned or anything like Al was. And Jake puts out the fire, and then is continued to bring brats to the table that he requested. And right before he's able to get to the table, something falls right in front of him, whether it's a chandelier, part of the ceiling, whatever. It drops in front of him, and that's the last example, or not really the last example, but it's the next to last example of past pushing back. So Jake is seated at the table, and he is given a complimentary margarita on the house. And once served the margarita, he has a tough time trying to figure out what's being said by the Warnshield and the two guys that are at his table, because either there's a whole bunch of people laughing and talking very loudly, or there are blenders, very noisily making, margaritas and everything, and it's very hard for him to hear what any of the men at the table are talking about. The only thing that he's for sure certain that is said is Lee Harvey Oswald's name, and that's it. So as he's driving home, he's all excited, and he says, "Ow, you're fucking right. That's the CIA. That's the fucking CIA. Everything, yada yada yada." He's all excited about that, and then he gets to the house and realizes the house that he's renting a room in is on fire. It's just literally on fire. The woman who owns the house and is renting the room to Jake, her son is being pulled out of the house, and the right side of his body is just like black because of the fire that caught onto his right side of his body. And then Jake realizes that all the stuff that he brought from Jake's study is burned, or almost all of it is burned. And so he's just like, damn, I can't believe all my stuff was burned. Um, and so he basically just, gives up and is like, you know what, I'm not gonna do this anymore, and decides to head back to Maine. And then next thing you see him at, the next place you see him in is in Kentucky somewhere. Um, and so he gets out the car, puts a map of Kentucky on the hood of the car, and is just looking at it. And then you hear the voiceover of Harry Dunning's voice talking about that night in October where he his father killed his mother, sister, and brother, and how he was living in Holden, Kentucky at the time. And so Jake decides to go to Holden, Kentucky to um, to do something about it. What he decided to do about it, he doesn't know yet, but by his facial features, he decides he's going to do something about that whole situation. So this kid who's coming towards Jake, um, says he asks the kid, where can I find Holden, Kentucky? And that's when the kid's like, okay, go back to where you came, like turn around, go back to where you came, and Holden, Kentucky's 30 miles that way. So that's when Jake goes to Holden, Kentucky, and he's sitting outside of the house that Harry lives in, and is watching his brother and sister, play around, and then his father comes and um, picks him up for dinner, and his mother tells his father bring them back by 6, and that's where the episode ends. Like I said in my previous video, either of the first episode of Marco Polo or the last episode of Escape the Night. I'm not gonna do any predictions for 11/22/63 because I've already seen it, but I would love to hear all of your uh, thoughts and ideas about what will happen next in future episodes. I'll discuss it with you. Just write it down in the comments below and let me know. With that said, if you like my videos, hit like. If you want to see more of my videos, hit subscribe. If you don't like any of my videos, can't help you there. It's not my problem. That said, I will see you guys later.